What are you worried about?
No, it's just like everything that's happening around. Like I know I'm not supposed to be worried. Like I'm trusting in the Lord in everything, but at the same time, it is kind of like hard to not worry with everything that's happening. They're talking about the dollar crashing, and you're like finally saving up some money, and then you're like, oh, that's gonna be worth nothing.
Yeah.
And then you have like the Trump indictment or whatever, and you just have a bunch of stuff going on, and it's like, man, I don't know. It's hard not to worry, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, the stresses of life and the way of the world has to go the way of the world before the glorious return of Jesus Christ. So, like, the world's going to world. The world's going to world. It's going to keep slipping down this slope of, just blatant disregard, immorality, confusion. Every modern society to date went through this weird pattern before its collapse of gender fluidity too. Mm-hmm. Have you ever noticed that? Like, within Roman culture, within Greek culture, every great society eventually went down this weird path of gender fluidity, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if there's a coincidence there or not. So, in our world today, we have this backlash against people of faith. And you get this phrase thrown around very often. It's the separation of church and state. Separation of church and state. And the question is, where does this phrase even come from? Do you think it comes from the Constitution?
I believe so.
Well, actually, it's nowhere to be found in the Constitution. Nowhere in the Constitution will you read separation of church and state. In fact, every state constitution, North Carolina state constitution, Florida state constitution, you get the point. Every single state's constitution references God and faith as a rule. So this heart of faith and believing in a higher power dictated the writings of every constitutional law put in motion in America. So the question remains, where did separation of church and state come from? And the answer is, it came from a writing that Thomas Jefferson made to the Danbury Church. And basically, the Danbury Baptist Church in Connecticut, they voiced their concern that the First Amendment did not offer enough protections for people of faith, for confessions of faith, for religions. And the First Amendment is read as this. I'm just going to quickly read it. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievance. So Danbury was like, hey, Thomas Jefferson, we're concerned that this First Amendment is not enough protection for what we want to practice our faith in. And Thomas Jefferson wrote them. And basically what he did is write them a letter of assurance. He's like, check it out. The First Amendment is sufficient. And the basis of that is that throughout the framework of the Constitution, we are building in stopgaps, safety valves, which prevent the government from getting too involved in the church. Mm-hmm. Not the other way around. So in the 1940s, there was a justice called Justice Black. Justice Black made some jurisprudence, some rulings, and he referenced Thomas Jefferson's letter to Danbury as grounds to separate faith from government, although it was never intended to be as such. In fact, if you read the letter word for word and the grievances that Thomas Jefferson is addressing, he has no concern about faith being in government, but government being in faith. Mm-hmm. Okay? So it was never supposed to be the other way around, and we see the proof of that because every state constitution references God, references faith as a blueprint. Another thing that Justice Black was a Ku Klux Klan member. So I don't think that he had a very good moral compass to begin with. And the KKK, their perspective was separation of church and state, because a lot of these guys really didn't have any practicing faith. They pretended, right? So what was my point, Dan? Can you help me?
The separation of church and state.
Separation of church and state. So separation of church and state is a big deal, because you hear people like a rebuttal towards people of faith. You know, people who do not have any faith or do not practice any religion, they use this separation of church and state as an argument to keep prayer out of schools, to keep prayer out of courthouses, the 10 Commandments coming down out of the outside of the courthouses, all these things. They're using this loose interpretation by Justice Black, who is a leader in the Ku Klux Klan, as grounds to take church out of government when it was never intended for that. This is I'll say this. Separation of church and state, it's not like this writing that Thomas Jefferson changed the course of America and faith in America. Faith in America was diminishing, and this postmodern thinking in the West proliferated, and it just so happened that someone stumbled upon that writing, that letter, and used it as ammo to carry out a self-proclaimed almost manifesto of taking the things of faith out of the public square. You know, I think that that's a really dangerous road to travel. And why do I say that? Because the framework of this country was based on faith. The removal of tyranny, the freedom to practice your belief in God, not limiting it. And it's really sad, because it's like it's almost unweaving the very framework of this country. And coming from, you know, all of us, you were born in Ukraine, right?
Yeah, I was.
You were born in Moldova, former USSR. What year were you born?
1995.
Okay, so not former, post-USSR.
Yep.
So we come from families of immigrants who grew up in the Soviet era, where the state was God.
Right.
And when we came to this great country, America, and you guys might be listening to this and you don't think we have an accent. My first language was Ukrainian. I didn't speak English until I went to kindergarten.
Same, actually.
Yeah, so when we came to this country with this beautiful idea of freedom of religion in this country, where the state doesn't dictate your faith or imprison you because you're a pastor, like my grandfathers were imprisoned for being pastors. And that story is the same old story in family after family of immigrants who moved to America. And when you see the dismantling of faith in America, it's very heartbreaking for me as an immigrant.
Yeah. And I can completely relate to you, because my parents went through it. My mom always spoke about, it's really sad actually, and she was basically raised in the Soviet Union, so was my dad.
Yeah.
Their parents so my grandparents were the first generation that came to God. And my mom and dad were made fun of all the time.
Yeah.
Like all the time. Like my mom would get put up in front of the class, and the teacher would allow the whole class to like poke fun at her and her faith.
Yeah.
My dad had to go to the army, and in the army he had issues as well. Like they just make fun of him, you know, call him names.
Where were
and
you
stuff like
this
that.
Sunday? You know, were you at church? Like, you know, it's just this constant diminishing of
Right.
a person's value.
So
Yep.
I might not be able to relate as much to the persecution aspect as they had, because whenever I was born, it was the post-Soviet Union. I remember my dad was already a pastor of a church. It was like 400 members, but they still came to America with the idea that it's not going to be the way it was in the the Soviet Union and the post-Soviet Union. So they came with this idea of freedom, not only of freedom of choice, but freedom of faith,
Yeah.
which is a really big deal to them. They wanted a better life for us.
So our conversation today is politics in the pulpit. What do we as Christians have as far as responsibility goes when it comes to faith and politics? Somebody told me one time, if you want to keep your friends, don't talk about religion and don't talk about faith.
That's true.
Politics. If you don't want to lose your friends, you don't talk about religion and don't talk about politics. We're going to talk about both tonight. So what is your perspective, guys, on what our responsibility is in the approach to politics? Because, you have two main parties in America, the Republican and the Democratic parties, and both of them have these, moral high grounds or moral, these silver linings within their beliefs. What is your perspective on
100% Christians should be involved in politics. And what I mean by that is partake. You don't have to go and become a governor or even a city official. You don't have to do all these things, but I think vocally we should speak out against the false narratives and speak up for the truth. It's just a lot of things like people want to stay away from that all the time because they don't want to cause division.
Yeah.
But if morality is being questioned, right? Like don't abort babies or don't transition kids. We as Christians need to speak up against that because it's something that's so dark and demonic, and the church is silent. Everyone's just kind of like, okay, well, God is coming, so we're just gonna wait.
What's too far in your opinion? Because
what do you mean?
I understand where you're coming from.
Hold on, what do you mean too far?
I'm talking about in regards to faith and politics.
Oh.
When does it become where your politics
Where does it become
over trump your faith?
Where does it become give unto Caesar what is Caesar's?
Well, like don't lie on your taxes, obviously.
No, I mean at what point do we disassociate ourselves from politics? Because whether we like to admit it or not, there are good and bad people in both parties. And there are good and bad policies in both parties. And the big talking points, and I think this is a really important thing to discuss as from our perspective of faith, is obviously the big talking point for the Republican Party is abortion. Right. So they capture a big faith base because most Christians are like, yo, you can't kill babies. That's not appropriate. That's murder.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I'm pro-choice.
Yep.
Same.
Wait, what?
No. I am pro-choice. You heard that right.
Wait. No.
Yes, I'm pro-choice,
No,
and
I'm
let me
not.
explain.
I
It's not. It's not in the sense that you think.
You got me, man.
I'm pro-
Yeah. Wait. What? Bro.
I didn't even think about it.
No, I got you on. I got you on.
Brethren. I can't believe you
I
said
got you on
said
video and
That's
No,
audio.
I am
man.
not. I am.
That's out of context.
I am pro-life.
I'm pro-life, 100%.
I
Oh my
respect.
goodness. All right, so
and
listen,
I-
hear me out. I am pro-choice. I'm strongly pro-choice. But it's not the pro-choice that you think when you think of the phrase pro-choice. I'm all about choice, but 2 or 3 choices before abortion. Like, you have the choice to have unprotected sex prior to marriage. That's a
Right.
choice.
Well, yeah.
So you have a choice to reproduce, right? You do that, and what's interesting is sin always breeds sin. King David, he lusted after Bathsheba. He wanted her, he committed adultery, and that adultery led to murder, right? So his sin, in an attempt to hide his sin, he wanted to abort his sin. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
He wanted to get rid of his sin. He wanted to get rid of Bathsheba's husband because he was problematic. Same thing happens. So when I say I am pro-choice, absolutely I'm pro-choice.
Man, all the haters are gonna just snip that
They're gonna
clip.
eat that up.
So
They're gonna
I'm
eat that up so
pro-choice
much.
because I believe that people have choices prior to
Well,
abortion.
yeah, obviously.
So when obviously I'm pro-life. I'm
Right.
pro-life, and to me that's, you know, in the regular sense of the term. But I am pro-choice in the sense that you have a choice way in advance before it comes to the choice of murder. And I do believe that a unborn child is a life. I believe that it has a soul like you or me. And just because someone makes a decision to take it out at, you know, the second trimester rather than at the 2-year, you know, like at what point do we draw the line? Like either black is black and white is white, or there's this gray area where we can just make up the rules as we go. And I believe that faith should play a part when it comes to this political issue.
Yeah.
I like how Jesus approached this topic, because we're speaking about what happened in Mark. It's Mark chapter 12, 14 through the 17, when they try to catch Jesus in a trap, right?
Yeah.
Some background. I actually got some of the stuff from Mike Winger, so shout out to Mike Winger.
Shout out.
But it was a thing called a poll
I don't know,
tax.
it gives me Calvinist vibes sometimes.
Okay.
I do like him though.
Shout out Mike Winger.
Shout out Mike Winger. I like you. But anyway, there was a poll tax once a year, and it was the Romans. And to the Jews, it was very dishonorable, and it was like a control thing for them. They really didn't like it. So whenever they try to catch Jesus in the trap, if he said yes, you know, you should, then to the Jews he'd be an enemy. He's like, well, you're talking against us. We're like prisoners to the Romans almost. Like, we have to give these taxes. And to the Romans, if he said no, then he would get crucified or he'd get punished. Like,
Yeah.
Rome is not like America where you say whatever you want and you can get away with it.
Yeah.
Well, for now we can. I don't know eventually how it's going to be. And one thing that even Mike Winger said is the principle is stronger than a yes and no. The biblical principle. So instead of saying, oh, this is one part of this is good, one part is bad, I think everything we say needs to lead back to the biblical principle of things. And that's exactly what Jesus said whenever he answered to them, you know. So in regards to giving an answer on your political views, you really need to think about what is the biblical principle, and you will know where you stand, because you just saying yes to a certain thing or no is not good enough, because people always find a way around it. That's what I'm saying.
Could you give me an example of that?
A biblical principle?
Yeah, like whenever you're saying someone will find a way around it, could you give me, can you give me an exchange or an example of that so I could better understand what you're
For example, instead of saying what's on the topic of abortion, do you think abortion is wrong, yes or no? You could say yes or no, right? Or you can bring up the biblical principle of thou shalt not kill and thou shalt not murder. Therefore, it's not just you saying an empty yes and then trying to bring up we had the discussion about morality, and bring up your morality as proof or evidence of why you think so. If we have our faith, we can base everything we believe off of our faith and put that principle in that faith.
It's interesting you said thou shalt not kill or murder. The word kill that was initially put into the 10 Commandments was incorrectly translated. It's actually supposed to be thou shalt not murder, not thou shalt not kill, because there's a big difference
There is a
between
big
killing
difference,
and murder,
actually,
right?
yeah.
So self-defense, you can apply
kill
this.
someone.
Yeah, I mean, you know, someone breaks into my home, I'm reaching for the Second Amendment.
I strongly believe in that.
I mean, not because I'm afraid of losing my life, because my life, my eternity is secure. But as a father, I have a responsibility to my family.
Why does Jesus tell the disciples to grab like a sword with them or buy something for self-defense whenever they go, I guess, to spread the gospel or go to a different town?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
That's
pretty
yeah.
interesting. So,
Yeah.
go
What's
ahead,
your
Dan.
perspective, Dan?
On what?
Well, I mean, we were talking about what Nazada specifically was chatting about, how, you know, there's sometimes gray area. Like, for example, someone says, you know, abortion is wrong, but someone else can counter with, Well, what about in instances of rape? You know what I mean? Like where this
So-
gray area, and again, sin breeds sin.
Yeah. So I mean, like, in the instances of rape, let's talk about that for a second. The value of a human life is never to be compared to a tragedy that happens to someone else. So whether this person was raped or whether this person chose to have the baby or whether it was an accident, the value of the human life, the value of the baby remains the same, biblically speaking. It remains the same. So if we're going to apply the Bible, then yeah, obviously don't murder the baby regardless. You were raped, pray for healing, pray for peace, but don't murder the baby. And the Bible also says, let your yes be yes and your no be no, right? So you can't pick and choose the things that are convenient, because a lot of times Christians even pick the things that are convenient to them when it comes to politics, and they go after that. But then when it comes to like more like controversial topics, it all of a sudden turns into that gray area, and they don't really want to. They don't want to get involved. They step away. They're like, I don't know enough about that, and that's an issue. Because as Christians, we know the truth, and we know the full truth, not of just of Jesus Christ, but the full truth of just in general, of the truth of morality, for example. Like we have morals that the world doesn't hold.
So, my view on morals, morality in politics, I believe that certain politicians know how to frame their perspectives and viewpoints in order to capture a particular crowd. And so there are known instances of Democrats flipping to the Republican Party in their county or wherever they are in their local government or whatever they are in their state, whatever, in order to achieve a political advantage, because they know that there's a disproportionate amount of Republicans, for example, in a certain area. They might not believe an ounce of what they're saying. There might not be a moral fiber in their spine.
Yeah.
But what they do is they harp on the talking points. So how do we navigate that in our society today? Because you have people like divisive characters like Donald J. Trump, for example, Orange Man Bad, okay? You know what I'm talking about? Like people have that perspective. Like he's got a lot of baggage that he carries around, and the man is not a model Christian or model citizen. I mean, in a lot of instances, he's got a lot of baggage that he carries. So how do we navigate that, for example,
So
when it comes to faith and politics?
Choose
first
your
of
words
all,
wisely,
MAGA,
man. Of course.
Okay.
make America great again. Listen, everybody has baggage, and everybody at the end of the day is in some way or form a bad example of a Christian. Even I myself, sometimes I'm a bad example. Does that make me any less of a believer? No, it doesn't. Donald Trump admits Jesus is Lord, in public. Yeah, he says sometimes he says stupid things. He does stupid stuff. But at the end of the day, whenever his morals align more to Christian morals, then I believe that we as Christians need to support him. Even if his what's the word I'm looking for? Motive.
Okay.
Man.
Motive.
Yeah, even if his motive is like to just gain popularity, is good stuff being done? Is our country like growing in a good way? Are things being fixed? Yeah.
So how do you disassociate, for example, as a Christian, and I mean this in all sincerity, because I've struggled with this personally. How do you disassociate the person and their actions to what they're saying, they believe? And yeah, there might be some benefit to this country under a certain person's leadership. But like then you have stuff like hush money for, you know what I'm talking about.
Right, but we don't know if that's true yet, right?
Well-
So the question that comes to mind is, if we're going to look at it from a biblical perspective, we have to take people in the Bible that were pretty much in the same state. After hearing that David kills what's his name? Uriah, you know, and sleeps with his wife, would you still want David to be your king
Well,
in
he
today's time?
he was this close from being removed, but he, you know, whenever he was
he was really close
convicted
from being removed by
the
God
prophet,
himself,
yeah.
but the people, like as a person in the kingdom hearing that, you know, would you be like, oh man, I don't think I want David as my king anymore?
For me,
I feel like it would be very controversial. If this happened today, if Donald Trump were to cheat on his wife, sleep with some other woman, and kill the dude, bro, absolutely everybody would be like, no, we're not voting for Donald Trump. And they would have almost literally every right to not do that.
the issue is, I think even what you're asking as well is, when is it too much to back someone up at a certain point, knowing everything they might have done, or even though
It's too much whenever you.
Well,
Sorry, man. It's
No,
let me just real quick. It's too much whenever they start doing bad stuff and you try to find excuses for their bad stuff. That's too much. So if somebody's corrupt and they show clear signs of corruption, and you're like, no, it's just that's not true, and you're trying really hard to fight that, then that's you're at that point you've gone too far into, even if he has good morals and you're trying to defend his sin, that's different.
I'm going to go back to the biblical principle, and this is, I think, why I choose to vote for who I vote for, even though some people are libertarians. They kind of want to, not Republican, not Democrat.
Yeah,
but,
independents kind of
Mhm.
flipping, flopping.
And I don't think that's necessarily bad. I don't know if it helps necessarily the country or not.
I think it's bad.
But my thing is, regarding the biblical principle, is I go for the lesser evil, or things that align more with the biblical word and what God desires more, even if their intentions are not pure. I'm thinking as well about those millions of kids being aborted. I'm thinking about, the LGBTQ stuff that they're the transgender stuff that the Democrats are trying to pass. And I know, like I said, it's not all black and white. Some things are gray. The Republicans also support things that are sinful. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
at this moment, it's just like, I can sit by, not do anything about it, or I can at least have my vote that I have the right to. And I think both are evil in some
So,
aspect.
I
But
like
I will
that-
go for the lesser evil, or the ones that align more with the biblical principle of it.
I like that you brought up, people that choose to not vote at all because they disagree with, even with the good politician, let's just say. The issue with that is, if you can have a person that can save your country in some sort of way, or benefit your country in some sort of way, even if you don't like his ego and pride, why not vote for him? It's like being in an airplane and the plane is crashing because the pilot that's driving the airplane is just a straight up cuckoo. Like he doesn't know jack squat about it, but he promised you that he did, and the plane is flying into the ground, and there's a guy in the passenger seat and he's saying, I can fly this plane, but you know what? I'm prideful and I'm egotistical, and I want you guys to say that you love me and appreciate me. And maybe he was mean to the flight attendants, but he knows how to fly the plane really well. And then those people that don't vote are basically like, yeah, I don't like that guy, so I'm just not gonna. I don't want him to fly the plane. That's literally what you're doing. Your country is burning to the ground because you have one politician in there. And obviously, there's a lot of background stuff happening too. It's not just the president, but I do believe that the president has a lot of influence and a lot of say. So, not voting for Donald Trump because you don't like him, even though he can benefit the country, is allowing your plane to just
Which
crash.
country? I can get really
America.
controversial right now.
What do you mean, which country?
Well,
America.
this is what I'm about to get controversial about. Amongst our Slavic community right now, the Republicans aren't very popular because of the war that's going on in Ukraine. Right? So that's a very controversial topic. Right now, it seems almost like the Democrats are doing better for us than the Republicans are. I just want to know what you
What?
guys think about that. No,
Where does it seem
no,
that Democrats are
I'm
doing
saying,
better?
and I'm not saying that
No,
the Democrats are.
I agree with what you're saying.
Explain what I'm
absolutely.
trying to tell
Yeah.
them.
No, so within like Ukrainian communities, for example, there's concern with longtime conservatives, longtime Republican, voters who are like, like I gave you the example. If someone broke into my house and I have a responsibility to defend my family, right?
Yeah.
Like, what if you said, no, you don't have that responsibility? Or you are my neighbor and I asked you for the means by which I could defend myself and defend my family. And you say, man, I don't think you earned that right, or you deserve the
Not
right
as
to
important as
yeah,
So
you're not as
who-
important. So as a believer, as a Christian, as someone a faith, what is our responsibility also to help those who are defenseless?
Also keep
Help
in
them.
mind I'm not
100%
I'm not
help
pushing I'm not you assume that I'm pushing this Democrat view. I'm just bringing up what's going on in the war in Ukraine and what how Republicans are responding and Democrats. Because like I said, there's very differing views on that subject right now.
Yeah,
I just
but
wanna-
there's also a lot of like mudslinging, because like you'll have individuals who like have a very particular perspective, and it's well documented that some right-wing figures, conservative figures, are against the support, the military support in Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's as clear as day. There's that's the position that's
So
being
when
taken.
you mean by
Hold on, let me
military-
finish my thought.
Okay.
That's the position that's being taken, and in turn, you have to assassinate someone's character in order to cause someone to say. So if you said you need to supply something for them to defend themselves,
Yeah,
right?
go
You
ahead.
said
Yeah.
that's what you would do.
Yeah.
It's their right to defend themselves. You would want
Yeah.
to supply the means for them to defend themselves. Well, the only way for you to change your moral stance about helping those who need the means by which to defend themselves is to character assassinate somebody and make him, in this case, President Zelensky in Ukraine, to be a dirty figure. And
Okay.
a narrative, the narratives about money laundering and stuff like that. I'm going to Ukraine next month.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm not laundering any money, guys. Just confession, just
I
FYI.
understand.
I hope I don't get a post that says all those meds that you're taking, you're selling on the black market in the back streets of Kiev.
No,
That's
I
not
understand.
happening.
Yeah.
I'm going there, because I want to help those who are less fortunate and who have been affected by the evils of war. War is hell. People
Yeah.
are dying needlessly. Another country invaded a sovereign nation, and this argument, these
So
ideas.
let me ask you a question. Why didn't you go to Iraq
What do you mean?
when America invaded Iraq? Why didn't you go there to help? Or whenever,
I was
the Taliban
I was
is attacking
16 at the time, so
the Taliban or whatever, the Taliban is attacking constantly, people,
the
innocent
thing
people,
is, yes,
torturing people.
well,
But
let's
why
say
aren't we
it gets
going
personal,
to
right? 'Cause you
don't
have-
deviate from the discussion. We're talking about
Right.
Ukraine now.
Exactly.
Well, there's
So
people that
the
are in
point
need
that-
well, let's say, like I said, I see where you're coming from, but the issue gets more personal than that for people that have families, that have
So
friends.
it's personal and it's a lot of emotion going on here. Okay. Like I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's not emotional, because it is.
Bro, if
Now-
Moldova got invaded by Russia, I would feel the exact same way as I feel in regards to Ukraine. Same thing
I
with
don't
Latvia.
know. I don't know.
Same thing with
I don't
Finland.
know, man. No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well,
There's a lot of war going on. What about Korea, bro? North Korea, Kim Jong-un. Homie legit is torturing his people. He's putting them in slave camps where they are working day and night. Children. Okay? Why isn't the world getting together to stop this guy?
okay. So,
Let's ask that question.
well, I'll answer the question. First of all, have you heard of the Budapest Memorandum?
No.
Okay, so the Budapest Memorandum was signed by 3 nations, by Britain. It may have been 4. I think maybe France was in it. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But the U.S., Russia, Britain, and it may or may have not been France in the mix as well. The Budapest Memorandum was a contract that was signed by Ukraine, by the then president of Ukraine, of independent Ukraine, post-Soviet Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, Ukraine had the 3rd most nuclear warheads in the world. Okay? 3rd most. America, Russia, Ukraine. And in turn, basically they came up with an agreement because there was a lot of corruption in Ukraine. And I'm very open to the fact that Ukraine has and maybe has had and maybe has a lot of corruption. But I think that there's a lot of changes happening in the country. And time will tell. Everything will come to the light. But the Budapest Memorandum stated that if Ukraine gave up all their nuclear warheads, that if anyone invaded their sovereign territory, one of these nations who signed the Budapest Memorandum would come to their defense. Yeah. In fact, send troops to defend. So right now, America, even though that they have the responsibility to...
America signed it too.
America signed it too.
Okay.
All of these nations signed it.
Okay.
But what's tricky is one of the nations that signed the agreement is the one attacking. Because Russia said, yeah, we'll defend you if someone invades you as well. They said that as well. So Russia invaded, and this is a really tricky ground. So what do you do when one of the nations who signed the Budapest Memorandum is attacking? Well, America and Britain, they are obligated, based on the Budapest Memorandum, to defend Ukraine. But they're not even sending troops. They're just sending weapons. They're sending materials by which they can defend themselves. And that, to me, is the least that they can do. Because, if Ukraine still had those nukes, maybe this wouldn't be happening.
Probably
and
not.
So how can you approach, for example, North Korea? You brought up North Korea. And North Korea, if America says, listen, if you give up your nuclear program, we will come to your defense if someone invades you. And America, whether we like it or not, is the policeman of the world. That's how it is.
For now.
Well, because they're the greatest. America is the greatest superpower, military superpower in the world, and by default, that has happened. So, if America, everybody in this room, I think, can agree that it's a good idea for North Korea and for Kim Jong-un, that warhead-loving little man, to not have nuclear weapons, okay? Everyone can agree it's a good idea. But you can't, what kind of weight can you carry as America? Say America was a person. What kind of weight could they carry? And how could they convince North Korea that they would come to their defense if they're not going to stand by what they said with the Budapest Memorandum? Their words mean nothing.
Yeah.
If it's like, yeah, give up your nukes, but when the time comes, we're not going to step in. Ukrainians are willing to, war is horrible, man.
Yeah,
People are dying,
obviously,
and we're praying for peace in my household every single night for peace in Ukraine. Yeah. I want this war to end, but I also believe, as a person of faith, that we have to come to the defense of the defenseless.
Yeah.
We have to come to the defense of the defenseless. And I would apply that same logic to Moldova. I would apply the same logic to Latvia, to the Baltics, to Finland. I would apply the same logic. And if Russia was being attacked by China and the tables were turned, and Russia was being attacked by China and they didn't have the means to defend themselves, which isn't the case.
Yeah.
I would say the same thing about Russia. My wife is half Russian. I got no problem with Russian people, okay? But what is happening right now is
It's
evil.
a political war. At the end of the day, it's a political war. And I will say this, that nothing justifies the killing of innocent people. No matter what it is, let Zelensky be corrupt. It does not justify Ukraine being tormented. It doesn't. It doesn't justify Ukrainian people suffering and getting bombed and killed because of that.
But that's a loaded statement. Like, he's corrupt.
I'm just saying in general, like
money laundering.
Even if he was or wasn't, it doesn't just, no matter what it is, no matter what the reason for the war is, whether it's corruption, some sort of other political thing, it never justifies innocent people being slaughtered and murdered. However, actually, I probably shouldn't say however, because then
I was waiting for that.
No. So the American people, the reason why I believe that the Republicans are upset with the way that America's handling this war, and the way that America is set to give $200 billion to Ukraine.
Yeah.
So far, they've given 73.
Let me put a footnote on that. The $200 billion that you're talking about
Yes.
to Ukraine, they're not writing a blank. You're acting
Right,
like
they're supposed to pay it back.
Hold on. You're acting like Biden is writing a blank check to Ukraine and handing it to Zelensky in cash. Like cash it at your leisure. This is how they're coming up with these figures. And you won't read this, you won't hear this from some pundits, but basically this is feeding the military industrial complex. And what's happening is America is saying, okay, we're going to give you all these HIMARS, these missiles, these tanks, whatever. We're giving you this equipment. We, in turn, will buy new equipment. So it's in America's favor. Look, let me say this clear, just so I put it on the table. I believe that it is in America's best interest for this war to be as protracted, as bloody, and as bad as possible, because the enemy of their enemy is their friend,
yeah.
right? And what benefit is it for America for this war to end quickly? It's not very.
It's not. No.
It's not.
There's a lot of corruption in America too. America's
Look,
super corrupt.
I get that. I'm not naive to that fact.
Yeah.
But I will say that what is happening is these figures are getting inflated and skewed because they're sending equipment, and then what they're doing is buying new equipment to replace that equipment at the current price tag. Okay. So they're buying this equipment. They're saying, okay, we're going to give you 100 tanks. We're going to buy 100 new tanks, state of the art. And the cost for those 100 new tanks is going to be $50 billion, just example. So they're saying we're giving $50 billion to Ukraine, even though that's not the case. They're giving the 50 tanks to Ukraine, or whatever the amount is. They're replacing the equipment that they're giving at the current price tag, and that's how the numbers are.
Yeah. So again, back to like the reason why, right? So you mentioned that Republicans, they're disliked in the Ukrainian community right now because of the way that they're saying how like Zelensky's corrupt and on like whatever.
I mean, look at
there.
Madison Cawthorn.
Yeah,
man.
like I understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like he's an example. DC Drano is not very favorable right now. So I kind of want to give you a reason, I guess, or like what their thoughts are. So they don't like that the way Joe Biden is handling this situation.
Of course they don't. They're Republicans.
But wait, watch. No. So we're for helping Ukraine. It's not that we don't want to help Ukraine, or it's not that the Republicans, I'm not going to say we, I'm just going to say Republicans. It's not that the Republicans don't want to help Ukraine, or they're like, oh, we're against any kind of funding ever. They're not that. The issue is that whenever you have issues in your own country that this president will not address, but instead he addresses issues in foreign countries.
If
right?
your neighbor needs a coat, take off the one you wear and give it to him. That's biblical.
Right. But at the same time, like, for example, Ohio. But what if you have two coats? Can you not just... If you have two neighbors that need a coat and you have two coats, can you not give both coats away? That's what I'm talking about here. So Ohio happened, right? The chemical spill, crazy, everything. Like, people needed help. Water's poisonous. Animals, fish are dying. Like, people were told to evacuate. Joe Biden will not visit. Joe Biden goes to Ukraine and they fake an alarm. It starts going off and it's all fake and debunked. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it was fake, but he would not go to Ohio to help his own people. Trump announces that he... And
How
FEMA...
do you know it was fake, by the way?
We'll talk about... Oh, it was. That's what they were saying about
Ukraine, it. Air raid sirens were going off 75%.
So there was no... So 75% of the day, but there was no attack happening at all. It just went off randomly, and then it was like, oh, okay. Like, there was no... Where he was, it was in that, like... section area, whatever. There was no attack and nothing ever happened. So that was they were saying that was debunked. I'm like, okay, cool. Ohio happens. He wasn't going there. FEMA decides that they're not going to go help. FEMA, people, the organization that's supposed to help, that's supposed to help people. They're like, we're not going to go. Right. Donald Trump is like, okay, I'm going to go. Even if it was political for him, right? Even if he was going to do it simply for ratings and views and politics, he still went. And guess what? All of a sudden FEMA's going. All of a sudden Joe Biden's like, oh yeah. He would not visit the border. for the longest time, he would not visit the border where we have an invasion. We're talking about Russia invading Ukraine. We have an invasion in our own country. And it's not where it's being bombarded, but drugs are coming in, smuggled in all the time. And guess what? Nothing's being done about it. The wall project was stopped. Our gas.
Can I tell you what America's best kept secret is in order to create?
Just really quick. So our gas, right? Trump had a pipeline, installing a pipeline so we can have our own oil reserve. Joe Biden shuts it down. Guess where he starts buying oil from? Russia. Then it was Brazil or whatever. He starts buying from foreign countries. This tells you that this administration is clearly not for its own people. And like I said before, there's a lot of emotion going on. And what you stated earlier, they find ways to what? They find the majority of a crowd that believes in something, and then they pretend like they're for that crowd, and then they basically switch the views of the people, right? That's what we were talking about earlier. So same thing happened here. You have Joe Biden, who's like, oh yeah, Ukrainian people are suffering, and a lot of Ukrainians are upset and emotional. Oh yeah, I'm gonna go.
Emotion, bro.
I know, but I'm saying like he's using what's going on to benefit himself and in his own way.
Look,
right?
Dan is basically saying America first.
America first. That's all I'm going to say.
He believes
We're
care
in
of
this
yourself
country.
first
We live
and
in this
everyone
country.
else is second. Which
But how is look? I get what you're saying. You know that.
I'm not saying stop helping Ukraine. I'm saying why can't we help our own people and also help Ukraine? Why is it that Why is it that America is only helping Ukraine but not its own people?
America
that's
is
what I'm
helping
saying.
itself
It's not.
with the war too, bro. That's what I just said.
It's not helping it. It's putting money into the corrupt politicians' pockets.
No,
But the
it's
people
not.
of America are suffering. People of America are not being taken care of. They don't care about them. That's all. It's clear that this administration
No, that's
doesn't
the
care.
talking point. The talking point is clear. And you'll notice that in order to justify the point of view of not helping people who are, being invaded and brutally killed by a outside military, you have to character assassinate somebody. And, they had to character assassinate Zelensky. They had to you have to admit that the same folks who are saying America first are also character assassinating Ukraine and saying it's the money laundering capital of the world, right?
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
Is that
to a
correct?
point?
Yeah.
To a point. Yeah.
So why do they have to do that if it's true? Like follow like for me, like what is bothersome? Traditionally Republicans were war hungry or trigger happy.
right.
I mean, if you look at historically, the Republican Party were more eager for war rather than, not pursuing conflict. And the Democratic Party, look at it historically, and the roles have switched. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing necessarily. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is traditionally that was the case. And it's very strange to see this paradigm shift within the parties. And again, I think it's too early to tell. But like for me, what's troubling in regards to this particular issue, America is obligated to help that country.
Yeah.
It's obligated to help based on
agree.
the Budapest Memorandum.
I
No
agree.
one wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to talk about that. The fact that there are not American troops in Ukraine helping defend is the best case scenario. Ukrainians don't want foreign troops. They want just help.
Yeah.
man.
They
They want help
Yeah.
to be able to defend themselves. And I think that it's fishy when people have to character assassinate and fling mud in order to prove their point. And it becomes really sticky for me personally as a Christian to see people who are influential Christian leaders have very skewed political perspectives in regards to support for Ukraine. And it's troubling to me because, like, they have a particular perspective that I agree with, but this perspective I completely disagree with.
Okay.
And it's troubling to me, and I have trouble aligning myself to some of the things they say because it's like, I'm Ukrainian. Of course I'm going to be biased towards Ukraine. But
Yeah.
again, I know that I would feel the same way if it was Moldova, if it was Finland, if it was the Baltics, I would feel the exact same way. I would.
See, the thing is, like, if Moldova is said to be attacked, and I have relatives there as well, so my heart goes out to them as well, and like I would feel
What would you do if Moldova? What would be your perspective?
America first. I live in this country. We like that. That's the thing is like
You
whenever
came here
you're
as an immigrant, though.
yeah, but America first. The reason why I'm saying this is whenever you're gonna make one country go to crap to benefit another country, that's the problem. That's what's happening right now.
Nazad, what if...
That's what I think is
what if
happening right now.
conservatives, whenever we started showing up in droves in the early 90s, pre- and post-Soviet Union collapse, what if people said, there's an invasion, the Russians are coming, the Ukrainians are coming, the Slavs are coming,
Right.
the Moldovians are coming. I mean, we were those immigrants.
I'm not saying that we should. I'm not saying that America shouldn't help Ukraine. I'm saying why can't it do both?
Can I
That's
tell
the
you
question.
the best kept secret?
Why can't it do both?
Can I tell you the best kept secret of the American workforce? Immigration. Did
Great.
you know? No. Did you know that our country, from a population standpoint, is on the decline?
Okay.
People are not having kids, right?
Yeah.
We started this conversation with abortion.
Yeah.
Abortion disproportionately affects poor and colored communities and immigrant communities and,
Yeah.
communities of color and minorities.
Yeah.
Okay? Disproportionately. That's the data. But from my perspective, the secret to the growth of this country's economy and the difference between the economy of America and the economy of Russia, for example, if you look at things, I mean, you might be able to speak on this from an accounting standpoint, from a number standpoint. When you infuse individuals, workforce into the country, even if they're cheap labor or whatever, you are stirring GDP. You're stirring economic growth. What happens when you don't have anybody to work anymore?
Fails.
You open up the borders. That's
Yeah.
what you do. You open up the borders and say, "Come to me, all you tired, weary masses," like they did with us, with Ellis
Yeah.
Island.
Yes.
That's exactly what happened.
All I'm saying is, why can't we do both?
I'm not saying we can't.
But that's what's happening. It's
But no,
one,
but
what we're-
the perspective of some of the conservative minds is that we can't do both because there's
Well, I disagree with
character
that too.
Yeah, but
I
there's
disagree with
character
that.
assassination. The point is, if we're sending
Gotta
money,
ma-
it's for evil gains and ill
Someone
purposes.
has to be evil. Someone has to take.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's obviously
single
like
time.
obviously
So
it's to benefit the political side of the Republicans to like you said character assassinate. To me, look, like I said before, whatever the reason for this war is, whether it's corruption, politics, I don't care. It does not justify suffering of innocent kids, and I believe that America is obligated, like you said, and it should help in whatever way it can. I'm 100% for that. What I'm not 100% for is America, this administration specifically, choosing other foreign countries above its own people all the time. Almost every time. Anytime someone has set something in place to benefit this country, they have stopped it. That's what I'm against.
Do you recognize, though, that Nazad, do you have something to say? Because I feel like you're just.
I'm enjoying this. But I'll say something at the end. I'll ask you guys a
Okay.
question.
So, what I was going to say is, I almost lost my train of thought, but I think I got it back. Whenever people say that America can't help other nations because it has to help itself first, I don't know if that's a faith perspective.
But I didn't say that either. I know America can help itself as well as helping other people.
Yeah.
We're capable of that, right? But it's not happening. It's
How
not
is it
happening.
Okay.
I
Well,
gave
that's-
you
that's-
multiple examples. Oil pipeline, Ohio, the border. Like it's not. There's a lot of things in place that Donald Trump had going. Started building a wall. Started building our own pipeline. He started things in motion. Once Joe Biden went in, shut it all down.
Look, I
for
think
what?
I think Trump had some beneficial policies overall for America.
Yeah.
If there was another candidate,
Like DeSantis, Ron DeSantis.
I mean, you said it, not me.
The thing is, man, So many people
Go
are
down
are
the
saying-
rabbit hole, man.
No,
Okay,
wait, one
no.
second, one sec. Ron DeSantis can be bought. Trump cannot be bought.
I
That's
don't
why.
agree with that.
Yeah, 100%, bro. If you came to Ron DeSantis
I
and you
don't
offered
know.
him $1 billion, he
I
would
think
stop.
anybody can be bought.
No, Donald Trump
I think
can't.
100%
Donald
anyone
Trump
can be
can't.
bought. Just because he's being indicted right now doesn't mean that he cannot be bought.
He
Or
cannot
now
be bought.
that he's being
He-
indicted.
at the World Economic Forum, okay, he stood up and he started calling out, saying that they cannot control him because he can't be bought. He doesn't care
Listen,
about their money.
And I like
He's
Donald
exposing
Trump. I
all these
personally
things.
like Donald
Ron
Trump.
DeSantis,
but I'm saying
he's a great
I feel
guy.
like we sometimes glorify these figures so much.
We talked about it with
Like
last time with
yeah,
prophecy and
like
stuff
I said,
that.
it's this gore, and this is where I actually wanted to bring it back to this, politics at the pulpit. A lot of times we, even as Christians, I caught myself, Trump this, Trump that. I still like Trump. If he goes up against a Democrat, I will vote for Trump. He's the lesser evil. But I'm saying we treat him like he's the best thing since sliced bread. Like he's the best. Like there's nothing better than
Yeah,
him.
you're talking about a guy who has significant question marks.
And like I said, and I'm going-
again, if
wait.
a person were to save you from drowning or whatever, from a crisis, would you not be like, "Wow, thank you so much.
But
You're
he-
such a good
we're-
guy."
We're putting these.
No one's
figures that are
glorifying
flawed on
Donald
such a
Trump.
pedestal. Well,
No one's glorifying Donald
yes,
Trump.
people
No,
are.
they're
And
not.
just like Biden,
They're just hopeful.
The left glorifies Biden all the time as well. And right now, like I said, just because Biden is doing one good thing, the left is all of a sudden. I mean, even the right wing Ukrainians are like, oh, well, we see Biden is helping us out. But I'm saying, from a biblical standpoint, from a biblical principle, how are we as Christians, even right now, we're having more of a debate. How are we as Christians supposed to approach this situation? And that's why I brought up the principle. The principle is greater than the yes and no. We have to understand when Jesus answered the question to the Pharisees, he answered it biblically. He said, give to Caesar what's Caesar's and give to God what's God's.
Yeah.
Same with this exact situation. I believe in this exact situation. If people are dying, whether it's in America, whether it's in Ukraine, you go help them. You can't.
That is your obligation as a person of faith.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes. That's what I'm saying.
That's
If it takes,
do both.
as unfortunate as it is, if it takes the Democrats to do it, that's great.
Look,
You know, if it takes Republicans to do good things, that's great. But we place so much emphasis on these political figures or right wing, left wing. Just do what's right. Base your politics off of what the word says more than anything else.
Can I say something? The world, like I said earlier, the world is going to world. The world is going to do what the world does. The world is going to go the way of the world. God, throughout biblical history, used both good and bad figures to accomplish his will. We know that things are going to get worse
Yeah.
because that's what the Bible says.
Yeah.
So, from a political standpoint, we have convictions. From a faith standpoint, we have convictions that are rooted in Scripture. That's who we are. That's our framework, moral framework. And we take that and we do our best to apply that to the politicians, the people we vote for or don't vote for. Like you said, the lesser of the evils. You do your best to navigate that. What I'm trying to say is, everything with time will come to the light. And whenever, it's troubling to me whenever someone has a perspective, a faith perspective, and then they contradict themselves with selfish perspective.
It's not even that. Before you continue, I'm not gonna try to interrupt you too much, but they contradict themselves with their political perspective, because they believe the right wing is so Christian or faithful that everything in the right wing is good. You know
And
what
that's
I mean?
not the case.
It's not the case. And,
I agree with
and like I said, in the left wing, there's way more bad. Actually, I 100%.
There's a lot of
I'm
questions.
not a voting Democrat. I'm a voting Republican as well. I'm
Yeah.
not. But
No,
you
yeah,
see,
I agree with that too. I understand what you guys are saying. I just at the end of the day,
there's this pedestal we just
Do it
put these
to-
politics on, and it worries me. Just not a Republican or a Democrat, but as a believer, how we are so quick to not even disagree, but Christians are so quick to divide
Yeah.
amongst themselves as soon
Over
as these
politics.
things happen. Over politics.
Yeah.
And even in politics, like they came up to Jesus. For the Jews, it was, you better say, no. And then for the Romans, you better say, yes, you have to give taxes.
Yeah.
And they were trying to catch him in that.
They were
They're
trying
like-
to catch him.
They were trying to catch him. Are you a Republican or are you a Democrat
Yeah.
right now? And what did Jesus answer them?
Give unto.
Yes.
Yeah. And the same perspective when Jesus stood trial before Pilate. Pilate says, he was questioning him, and Jesus is silent. And Pilate says, "Why are you silent? Don't you know that I have the power to release you or to crucify you?" And Jesus said, "You only have what authority has been given to you."
Yeah.
And he said, "Therefore, those who have brought me to you, have the greater sin." And what's wild is at that moment, the Bible says that Pilate knew that he had to release him because he's like, this guy is different.
Mm-hmm.
There's something at play here.
Yeah.
And I can't crucify this man. It's not that Pilate was a perfect moral character. He saw that Jesus was blameless. And how did the Jewish leaders of the time, the Pharisees, force Pilate's hand? What did they say? They said, "You are no friend to Caesar if you let this man go, because he says he's king. And we have no king but Caesar." Mm-hmm. That is just bonkers, because they knew the Messiah was supposed to come as king.
Yeah.
Right.
And what they
And they
were
rejected
confessing
him.
is they were saying, "We don't want the Messiah, we want Caesar."
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
the
that's
nuts
crazy.
part.
Right.
And so Pilate was forced. He's like, now I don't have a choice, because
Yeah.
they're basically putting me into a position where if I release this man who says he is in opposition, in direct rebellion to Caesar by declaring himself king, I lose my place
Right.
in my authority.
And it's this fear of man.
Yeah.
And it's the fear
That's
of the
good,
left,
man. I
fear
like
of the
that.
right. And that's why I'm saying bring it back to the biblical principle. I think that's the main standing point, main stamp, at least in my life personally. Like I said, I am leaning towards the lesser evil. But whenever I need to apply those biblical principles, I think we should think wisely about them before speaking on certain topics.
Yeah, I think we should be very careful when we apply politics to the pulpit,
Yeah.
because the pulpit is the place of faith, and the separation of church and state was supposed to be for the government, for politics, not to weasel its way into
Church.
faith, not the other way around. Our faith should dictate the government and politics and our leaders, but not the other way around. And it's troubling to me, it's heartbreaking to me to see when politics trumps faith at the pulpit, and then all of a sudden, like you said, you have these divisions within people of faith over politics. Like, who's your God at the end of the day?
Yeah. Is it red or blue?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that is so good.
Good. Yeah. I agree.
Great discussion, guys. All love, everybody who's listening. Look, there's room for disagreement. There's room for dialogue. The moment we stop talking to one another is the moment that we are doomed. So God bless. All the best.
Amen.